NBA newsbreaker Shams Charania is under fire for what transpired at the NBA draft. After making headway in sports media with having endless sources throughout the league, Charania is under fire once again. With the Charlotte Hornets on the clock, the betting favorite to go second overall was Scoot Henderson. They would end up taking Brandon Miller out of Alabama, a combo guard who is, by all estimations, a bona fide star in the making. Fans became confident because Shams would tweet, "Sources, Scoot Henderson is gaining serious momentum at number 2 with the Hornets in tonight's draft. Hornets have been torn over the last few weeks between Henderson and Brandon Miller. Team has final meetings today to settle on decision." Charania is a partner with FanDuel, a sports betting company. He would go on to say this of the number 2 pick.
As close of a selection as you're going to get. The Hornets do have meetings coming up in the next several hours where I think they're going to settle in on a decision potentially, or this could go right up until the clock tonight.
Charania's rival newsbreaker is Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. After the Miller pick, he would call BS on the Henderson at number 2 buzz. All along, the entire Hornets organization has been all in on Brandon Miller. Ownership, front office, scouts, coaches. They see him as a perennial future all-star player. With one push of the tweet button, Charania moved an entire betting line. Scoot Henderson, the man not taken, saw the odds shift to minus 380. Popular Twitter account NBA Retweet would go further, chronicling the seesaw of odds between Henderson and Miller. Conflict of interest has been thrown around with this story, considering Shams is a paid contributor to the gambling operator's TV network as a regular panelist on its weekday NBA show, which meant when the Hornets eventually took Miller second, there was bettors who lost money to a company that also pays Charania. Longtime journalist Jeff Pearlman would weigh in on the Shams controversy. "It is beyond insane that New York Times, The Athletic, allow Shams to also work for FanDuel. I don't care that times are changing, that it's a different world, etc. You cannot have a reporter with any sort of gambling ties, any at all, period." Pearlman sees a clear correlation between Shams and Supreme Court justices. ProPublica broke the story of Justice Samuel Alito and his friendship with billionaire hedge fund manager Paul Singer, who had cases come before SCOTUS with which Alito did not recuse himself. Then, of course, there is Justice Clarence Thomas, who, along with Alito, has failed to recuse himself from litigation that has come before the court, potentially involving billionaire Harlan Crow, who has bought Thomas properties, paid for Thomas's lavish getaways, including private jet flights and yacht cruises, and much more. Crow is a mega donor to the GOP. Via Pearlman once more, the New York Times opinion writers have correctly been slamming Supreme Court justices for taking money from outside interests. This stuff with Shams is in the ballpark, and America's biggest newspaper is ignoring it. Nah, perception is reality. FanDuel's statement would read as follows: "FanDuel is not privy to any news that Shams breaks on his platforms," a spokesman told Action Network. Charania is the co-host of Run It Back on FanDuel TV, so the likelihood that his bosses at FanDuel are not privy to any information that he reports on his platform is questionable at best, he wrote. And sure, they could be ignorant of what Charania reports for The Athletic and Stadium, but when that information is relayed on their airwaves, it's hard to play that card. Especially since Charania made an appearance on the Pat McAfee show, which is still platformed by FanDuel, and reported on Thursday that Henderson was gaining momentum to Charlotte at number 2. Former Mavericks executive Haralbus Vulgaris would weigh in. "I don't think there is anything nefarious going on, but I find it puzzling that a regulated sports book is allowed to take bets on the NBA draft and also employ an insider who can tweet nonsense that can move the betting markets." Darren Ravel of the Action Network would write in his piece, "There are presently no state or federal regulations to prevent the alleged conflict of interest. Ethically, partnerships between journalists, their publications, and sports books are fair game so long as there's no deceit or corrupt cooperation in those agreements." If he wasn't partnered with FanDuel, his tweets would likely still affect the betting markets, but the relationship in question certainly raises the hair on the back of your neck. Times are changing, but having a reporter with gambling ties certainly is a new paradigm for the sports media. FanDuel can pretend not to see Charania's tweets, and putting out a statement saying as much is their prerogative. At the same time, a sportsbook saying that they aren't aware of what's going on in sports, especially when someone they employ is reporting that information, is a hard-to-believe statement.